So this is a true American dream story. We're going to be talking with Mary Green. She was adopted as an infant from Seoul, Korea in 1969 by parents in Mason City, Iowa. Mary is now the entertainment editor of People magazine and was recently featured in the magazine in a piece titled "Coming to America Saved My Life, a People editor's immigration story." Mary took time out of her very busy schedule to join us today to discuss her personal immigration journey. Welcome, Mary. How are you? And thank you for coming on our show. I really appreciate your time.
Hi, thank you very much. It's great.
So you had quite an American dream story. I mean, your life, by just happenstance, could have changed completely different. You may not even be alive today, let alone living a completely different life. And here you are, a successful woman here in the United States of America. Tell us the story, Mary. Let's get right into this. Tell us the story. How did you come to America? What happened?
Sure, absolutely. Well, in 1969, in October, to be specific, my parents, adoptive parents, had already been approved and were going through the process to adopt a Korean infant, which back in 1969 was still very progressive.
And these are white Caucasian Americans in Iowa.
Absolutely. I was found shortly, a couple of days after birth. It was actually in the doorway of an abandoned building. And someone heard me. I was apparently blessed with incredibly strong lungs.
Thank God.
And, absolutely. They called the police and they took me to the hospital where I remained for a few months. I was very tiny and very sick.
So apparently you were birthed at home or in an apartment, but certainly not in a hospital, and you were left and abandoned, and you don't even know how long you were abandoned in that hallway. But thank God you were found, and and then you ended up being hospitalized for months. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, by the time my parents adopted me in October, I was 9 months old. I only weighed 12 pounds. So, I mean, did you consider the average.
Did your parents know they were getting a sick Korean baby? What was going through their minds in terms of picking you? Do you know?
I asked them that several times, and really the only thing they said to me was, we always knew we had more love to give. And rather than having more biological kids, the 4 oldest are biological, they had biologically, they decided to adopt. And they heard about the need for children to be adopted from South Korea. And, so they decided to embark on that. They didn't really specify whether the child should be healthy or not. I just ended up coming down with a severe staph infection, and the orphanages and with being overrun, they didn't have the medical care to give to me. So I was actually rushed in the final weeks to the United States so that I could get proper medical care.
You know, thank God for your parents. Listening to not only, being discovered in a hallway and then being sick with a staph infection and not having treatment options in South Korea, being rushed to the United States with weeks. I mean, you were on edge your first probably year and a half of whether you would even make it and be alive. And, I wonder how that makes you feel as you live your life now, knowing that you were given, by God or by your parents or whatever you may believe in, this second and third lease on life.
I've always grown up very thankful, very grateful for having all the opportunity I've had. And granted, I came to the United States when I was only 9 months old, so I didn't really know any differently, but I was always acutely aware of how fortunate I was. And I don't know why, but I've just always had this feeling then that things would be okay. Oh, yes, that's me the day I became a citizen.
So how was it growing up in Iowa? I guess you were not only being the only Asian child in the family, you may have been the only Asian child on the block or in the whole town, for all I know, in 1969. How did that make you feel knowing you looked different?
Um, there were times when it was challenging, in the 70s, growing up in a relatively small town in Iowa. Um, there were certainly incidents of racism, and it can be challenging. You just don't see people who look like you, so you don't necessarily have the same kinds of role models. But having said that, I will say that the choices my parents made with their friends and certainly with my family,
Hmm.
I was very fortunate in having people who cared, around me. And then I remember when I was growing up, among my friend group, they stopped seeing you as Korean or as being any different because I was just Mary.
Right.
So I think that also is a great lesson for people. They gradually, they do see you for you. And so I was always very fortunate. I also grew up being acclimated completely to Caucasian culture. So I was very comfortable. And to this day, I'm very comfortable in traditional, white.
Probably more so than Korean culture, I would assume.
Yeah, I think the first
Yeah.
time, in fact, really, it was on assignment for People Magazine, was the first time I really got to explore parts of the Korean American culture.
How'd you get to People Magazine?
Uh, a few years after I graduated from college, I actually decided to move to Chicago. And while I was there, I started calling around to media outlets. People Magazine actually let me come in off the street, and I started to read through newspapers, suggest stories. And when I was in there, I said, I will do anything you need. And at the time, serendipitously, they needed some assistant help. And
So
so
doing anything means starting on the bottom.
oh yeah, I cleaned offices, I made Christmas cards.
Right. I
I
mean,
mean,
right. That's the bottom. You start at entry level.
absolutely. And basically, I just stayed and stayed, and gradually they sent me out on an assignment and everything, and I got hired on full staff, moved to New York, and since then have just worked my way up, and had this amazingly fortunate career.
What exactly do you do there for People Magazine now? You've worked your way up through years and years of work. Tell us exactly what does a entertainment project editor do?
Sure. Uh, Basically, if during award season, let's say we're going to put together a portfolio of the Oscar nominees, that would fall under my purview. So we do a lot of special programs and things where we will go to the Toronto Film Festival, and we'll have a studio there for video and photography, etc. We'll have like hundreds of celebrities come in, and that would fall under my purview.
So you get to meet a lot of cool people, right? I'm probably the least cool person you're speaking to all week. So what's like the coolest people you've met in the last couple of weeks?
In the last couple of
Yeah.
weeks, one would be Oprah,
Oh, I mean, that's right up there, right?
and then some of the TV stars like Mandy Moore
Right.
just had the upfronts, where the TV networks announced their new shows for the fall.
That's really
So,
cool. You have a very cool job. You get to meet all these cool people. So now let me ask you this question, because People Magazine is all about celebrities and famous people. How did your story end up in People Magazine?
well, actually, the day that the travel ban was first initiated or first signed into executive order,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a post on my Facebook page just telling my story, which
Right.
I had never done before. I was offended by the travel ban. If we're going to start to come together, we need to see each other as people,
Right.
and not just as a religion or a region of the world. People started to read it, and one of the editors asked me, said, "Wow, I just saw this. Will you write a personal piece for us?" And I said, "Sure." So I wrote it up, and they posted.
Wow. And what kind of notoriety have you got from it? other than being on Bradshaw Live? Has other people, have you been on other news programs? Have people reached out to you and said, wow, what an amazing story? Tell us what the feedback's been.
Sure. It's been really, actually, it's been the personal feedback that's been so great. Other immigrants have reached out and wanted to talk and wanted to connect, and that's been the greatest part.
Have you ever wondered what life would be had you not made it to America? Had you maybe not been found? I mean, obviously, if you had you survived and just stayed in South Korea, you ever wonder what life would be like?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially every year on my birthday, but all the time when I was growing up, because had I been fortunate enough to survive, chances are I would not have been educated. There were many, many girls at that time where as soon as you're old enough to leave the orphanage, you are living on the streets. And so there's a good chance I either would have been homeless or become a prostitute.
Wow.
Because it's just
that's what happens to orphans there.
Yeah. And there were so many children in needs of homes and families that it's not as though there wasn't a system set up to help all these kids. And at the time, all these kids couldn't enroll in school. So there'd be a very good chance that I wouldn't have received any education.
Have you ever tried to, because a lot of adopted children, when they grow up, try to go back and find their birth mother or biological father? Have you ever thought about that, or have you ever tried?
I have, because I would like to go back and see if I can find any family members.
Right. Thank you. Mary Green, is there anywhere, can anyone still, I guess, go on People Magazine somewhere and read your article?
It is available. If you Google People Magazine Coming to America or Mary Green, the story should come up.
That's wonderful. Thank you again. I really appreciate it. All the best. Say hello from me to all the famous people that you meet. They'll be like, huh? Who is that guy? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Okay.